Hello there, and thank you for being with us on this edition of the RR Show. We've got a great one for you. Actually, it's two stories. The first one's going to be a little bit shorter, but fun nonetheless, of course. And then we're going to be having a long one. Both of them are Tales from the Front Desk. And if you are listening to this, you're enjoying it, please share the RR Show with a friend. We would greatly appreciate it because we want more people to be in on this fun. And we're working on some more fun down the road. So let's get into it. This first one is posted by user sthura13. My best comeback. Hey all, this one's short. I just want to share a good zinger. I got off with a rude guest. The scenario. I've just clocked in and not even sat down yet when a man approaches and asks to check in. I say, of course. What's the name on your reservation? He tells me, and I pull up the reservation. Me. May I see a photo ID with a credit card? Him handing me his ID. I left my credit card in the car. I'll go get it in a second. Sir, I'm gonna need to see it in order for you to check in. I left it in the car. I'll get it in a second. Sir, in order to check in, you need to verify your credit card. I told you that it's in the car. So I sit there quietly looking at him as I can't check him in without a credit card, and frankly, I'm unsure how to be more clear. Are you just gonna sit there and stare at me all night? Sir, I'm waiting for you to go to get your credit card so I can check you in. At this, he slams his hands on the counter and says, "You're a pain in my ass." Now, I've worked this shift for close to 2 years at this point and have dealt with a lot of nasty people, Karens, drunks, entitled shiny members, etc. My boss has always made sure that the front desk staff knows that if people raise their voices, swear, threaten, or do anything of that sort, we're allowed to ask them to leave, especially on this shift. So I stand up, calmly place his ID on the desk in front of me. Sir, here's your ID back. I'm gonna have to ask you to leave as we don't allow our staff to be spoken to in that manner. He splutters, swears again, and starts to argue with me. I raise my hand. Sir, if you're gonna call me a pain in the ass, I'm going to be a pain in the ass. Please leave my lobby. He asks if he can at least have a refund, and I inform him that I have to talk to the individual that he booked the room with, since his reservation was prepaid. He says he didn't book the room. His place of employment did. I inform him that, in this case, his company is gonna have to call that individual. What am I supposed to tell them? Well, you tell them you're a pain in the ass and that I'm not allowing you to stay. At this, he turned and left the lobby. And that's it. I was pretty proud of myself in the moment for getting that one off. I'm not as nearly quick on my feet as some of you folks are. I'm not normally vindictive about this sort of thing, but I'll admit I was hoping someone on our end would get to explain to his employers what happened and how he treats front desk staff. Somebody needs to know. It's also curious to me that he's unaware of hotel check-in policies if he does travel for work. As far as I'm aware, ID and credit card are essentially needed everywhere. This next one was posted on the subreddit r/Tales from the Front Desk, as was our first one, by user Canyon Lake Awake. VIP guest versus children in wheelchairs. I was a concierge receptionist at a country club for a short time. I had always lived near this one growing up, but had never been or known a member myself. I assumed people who joined or liked golf or wanted a place with a pool to hang out with friends or needed a private spot to host business meetings, practical things like those. For some people, that was why. For most people, it was to feel rich and important, when they were neither. Our clientele was primarily upper middle class people who wanted to feel upper class. There's nothing wrong with that, but for the most part, they did it by looking down at staff and treating our facilities like utter garbage. It was as though they couldn't afford to be entitled anywhere else, so they were gonna get it all out of their system at our place. And to make matters worse, this was a relatively small rural area, so I knew plenty of these families from school. The job description that I applied for boiled down to check guests in and out upon arrival, coordinate with valet services and amenities as needed. The job description that I actually got boiled down to was go to unreasonable lengths to make sure average people who don't tip at all feel like A-list celebrities who have tipped you $100. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with offering excellent customer service or going the extra mile. I knew it was a public-facing job, and I actually enjoyed making people feel welcomed and cared for. But I'd be asked to do things like take a break from my normal work to call a dozen food vendors in search of quail eggs because chicken eggs irritate the guest's stomach. And he didn't think to mention that when he made his reservation that he must have eggs. Or rearrange the entire day's schedule of the golf course because a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy has decided to bring 8 guests. Or give my own personal shirt off my back to a clientele's daughter because she spilled something on hers before a tennis match. The club did actually replace mine, but still. Extreme requests like that poured in. And that was just to me in reception. I can only imagine how much worse it was if you were higher up. So, bearing that in mind, my job could be irritating, but the pay was well worth it. There aren't many jobs in my town, and a gig at the country club was a prize. But still, this was the day I quit. A VIP member had just shown up, but not how you'd think. The club had 3 tiers of membership, essentially a basic, mid-level, or a top-tier VIP package. Admittedly, only a few clients sprung for the VIP package. Not because those who did were that high level and special, but because it came with very little extra perks and cost very much more than the middle package. Its premier features were all-inclusive food, extended access hours at facilities, and the ability to drive your car directly up to certain areas of the club to save yourself the walk. That was the most lauded because it was the most visible to lower-tier members. Ironic, since the place advertised itself as a health and fitness club. On this day, the club had opened its doors to a school for the differently abled. Most of the students had mobility challenges. I didn't know the full details, but basically the school didn't have the money for adapted and accessible sports facilities. Most of our facilities were. So they arranged a trip up to use them for the day, and under the circumstances, the club was donating meals and entertainment for other fun to make it a special experience. Because the students would be back and forth from these sports areas, all direct drive-up access for the golf and tennis facilities was blocked off for the day to ensure safe and seamless transport. It was the only time since I'd worked there that the VIP drive-up areas had ever been out of commission, ever. I was at the desk as usual. I'd been checking in families from the school all morning. The club was also hosting many of the parents. A family with a visibly sick child started stepping up to check in, taking a second to collect themselves and the child's motor-assisted chair, and some other related things they had with them. And a VIP member couple cut from behind them in line. There were enough VIPs that most had earned nicknames among the staff, and this woman was Kim, for her outrageous and bad plastic surgeries. She had a boyfriend who I think was the original member before she glommed on, but he was pretty normal, so if he had a nickname, I don't remember it. At first, I gave this couple the benefit of the doubt, because it is technically a VIP privilege to be able to cut the line, and we were trained to say, "Excuse me, we just need to assist a VIP." The owners mistakenly thought it would add an allure and celebrate to the club, and instead it just made us all feel more like posers than we already did. Most VIP members, shameless as they were still too embarrassed to ever do the line-cutting thing. Only our very least favorites pulled that. Worth noting, Kim's man never did when he was by himself. Usually, as hard as it made me cringe, I did my job and didn't question it. But as badly as I needed money, I wasn't going to shaft a family of a disabled child over some made-up hierarchy at a club. So I tried to make the best of both worlds and said the "just let me assist this VIP" line, then asked the couple, "Would you mind if I quickly finish up with these guests?" Figuring it was obvious they had a kid and the kid had time-sensitive problems. Kim didn't even hesitate. She said to us, she never really spoke to an individual staff member directly, sort of stared through us and addressed her comments broadly to the room. "Well, but are they VIPs?" The family weren't members and had no idea what she was talking about, so sweetly trying to defend me, they said, totally non-confrontationally, "Oh, hi, sorry, we were already in line here." I figured nobody was going to fire me for finishing helping this family, and if they did, so be it. I played dumb and said to the VIPs, "I'll be right with you." Then finished helping this other family. It took all of, 2 minutes. By the time they came to the desk, you'd thought an hour had passed. I could hear Kim tearing into her man while they were waiting. So when they approached the counter, he said, "We need to speak to your manager," in a tired and defeated sort of way. My manager wasn't too far off, so they came right over and heard them complain about how I'd ignored them and made them wait a long time. These folks were known for their frivolous complaints, so the manager nodded and smiled and asked how else she could help them. Then we got to the root of their problem. "Yeah, we were trying to go up to the tennis court and it's completely blocked off," Kim complained. "There wasn't anyone out there to help us, nothing," she announced, waving her arms. I remember thinking to myself, help you with what? It's blocked off, not on fire. But at this point, I still thought I had a job to worry about. The manager explained that the area would be blocked off today to provide access for an event. The lobby was flooded with families from the school, so it should have been obvious what he meant by that. And he didn't want to say because none of us were sure what was okay to say, as well as the fact we figured it was plainly obvious. There was a banner welcoming the school which has a child in a wheelchair on its logo hanging over our front entrance. This did nothing to settle them. They, Kim, launched into a speech about how the contract she signed didn't say VIP sometimes. It just said VIP. And they wouldn't have driven all the way in from the other town, which was a big 10 minutes away. And how we needed to let them drive up because they had no notice and they were already here and are VIPs, and on and on. I probably heard the word VIP more in that discussion than I had the entire rest of the month combined. Ultimately, like we kept trying to tell her all along, it wasn't our decision. Front desk staff didn't open or close those areas. Security and facilities and a bunch of other people who weren't there right then made those decisions in advance. We kept offering them free meals, free guest passes, whatever else. We tried offering them a golf cart ride over that was already available to them, but they said they didn't want that because it didn't get as close as driving. It is also worth mentioning that it takes significantly longer to drive to the tennis area than walk. Tennis was directly behind reception, a straight shot. The drive up was necessary for visiting families because of steps and other obstacles in the frontways. We kept making increasingly creative offers, but it wasn't doing any good. If anything, it almost seemed to make them angrier because they were hearing it as our fancy way of telling them no. As the conversation went on, our line was building. The club, of course, had made no arrangements to accommodate the visiting school guest-wise, so we had our normal capacity alongside the event population. The lobby was packed. Long lines were forming, full of disabled children and stressed parents who were meant to be there for a fun day of relaxing. My manager could see this unfolding, so she asked Kim and her man to finish the conversation with her in her office if they wanted to talk further. Kim was crazy, but she wasn't stupid. She knew what that meant. She collected her man and stormed off. We hoped they were just going home for the day and would let us deal with them when we didn't have a big, logistically complex event running at the same time. They went outside, but we could hear that they didn't leave right away. They stood out front arguing between themselves for another 5, maybe 10 minutes before the whining dissipated. Already, this seems like a lot more effort on their part than it was worth, right? Well, they were just getting started. After they finally got out of the front of the building, they started calling my boss's boss, then the owner. The owner was cut from the same cloth, so had no issues putting them off until tomorrow. It's now about 3 hours later. I'm out at the tennis courts helping work through any scheduling mishaps that have arisen from the day's events. That's when it happens. Kim, behind the wheel of a Tesla Model Y, came barreling past the barricades into a gathering area set aside for children and their families, barely avoiding hitting a mother and child. Kim was trying to pull into where the parking spots typically were, but we reconfigured everything that day to accommodate that larger crowd. She was driving so recklessly, she didn't notice any of the staff desperately trying to flag her down when she blew past the barricades. Her car coming crashing in sent the crowd scattering. Panicked parents who couldn't move their children in time threw their bodies over their kids, unsure what was happening. And when staff approached Kim's car, she angrily screeched, "Where'd my parking go?" Her car was escorted off the premises, their membership suspended. Mr. Kim wasn't even in the car. From what I was told secondhand later, Kim told him something to the effect of, "I'll handle this," after their blowout argument, and he was cluelessly waiting after trying and failing to get her just to go home. But he still lost his membership also. She was technically a secondary on his account. Perhaps my favorite part of all this, it's a small town so people talk. Plenty of higher-ups from the club were there that day for the charity event, and those who didn't see this happen heard about it almost as fast. Kim and Mr. Kim tried to pass it off as an accident, tell some story that she got confused by the blockades, lost control inadvertently while trying to navigate and blame it all on us, etc. But too many had already seen them trying to get around the blockades earlier and heard them having their very public argument, so that fell apart. Suffice it to say, it wasn't good for either of them to have the rumors of this day swirling around their reputations. But at the end of the day, the meeting reviewing this incident was not about how the staff were mistreated or the visiting families were placed in jeopardy, but how to contain any potential upset this might cause among VIP clients. Whether we should have foreseen this being an issue and created 2 separate parking areas or whatever. And that's when I quit. I gave 2 weeks notice. I didn't just walk out. Again, it's a small town, and of course, I needed a reference. I was there long enough to get the all-club email they sent out, which basically said, VIP membership privileges are available under normal operating conditions and may be subject to change for special events. Handicapped accessibility as directed by emergency personnel or other extenuating circumstances. We ask that you extend complete deference to the direction of the staff, but rest assured, a full day's rate compensation will automatically be credited to the account of anyone affected in such a scenario. Any lingering doubts I might have had about quitting were erased by the fact they had to send something like that. Oh, and to cap it all off, several members submitted unsolicited letters of reference on Kim's behalf, lobbying for her membership to be reinstated. So thanks for being with us. The RR Show is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and Wessler Media. Now, if you'd be so kind, please follow or subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra nice, you might as well leave a 5-star review. But for more, visit the website, rrshow.com. That is rrshow.com. I'm your host, Vince. Thank you to my producer, Kevin, and we'll see you next time here on The RR Show.